So I would ask, does anybody else have any other ideas on who Babylon the Great could be?
Who could it be if it's not the U.S.? Babylon is in modern day Iraq. Iraq's not making the world rich.
The only other country I can possibly compare it to would be China. I mean, they have a great immoral agenda going on over there as well.
The only thing that I would say with China is they haven't had the fall. The morality of China is virtually unchanged.
Well, but when you have like, and it's gonna sound weird for people who don't know, but they have like vending machines over there that sell used women's underwear. I mean, they're like they have hotels that specifically just for hookups, like prostitutes and stuff like that.
But you know who's buying that stuff?
Americans.
Well, it's
American businessmen.
Yeah.
It's American businessmen. You take, if it wasn't for global industry that's coming from America, if we weren't going over and negotiating with the businessmen over there to buy their wares, that stuff doesn't exist.
China never, at least not that I'm aware of, was never like a shining beacon of morality to begin
Never
with.
was, no.
And I think, I mean, that's
what I said. Like it's the only thing that's even like that you can even make an argument for. I mean, I don't believe it, but
Right.
it's the closest thing.
Yeah.
To be.
But see, but here's the problem with China. But here's the problem with China. China is not buying the world's goods, folks. China is selling the world their goods. They're not buying it. Babylon's a consumer. China's consuming right now oil and stuff, but as far as consuming, they're consuming basically what they're manufacturing.
Right.
And even when you think about consuming, we don't even use our products. We consume everybody else's, even like the oil. We consume everybody else's oil.
Listen, at this point in time, I'm not saying definitively that this is the United States, but I'm serious. For years, Pastor, for years I've taught that how could this be anything but the U.S.? Because I've looked and looked. For years, I bet for 15 years, I have taught on this. Because I've looked on this, and I've read it, and I've poured over it, and I'm like, there's not even a close second. Remember, I started at the very beginning, I said, this Babylon was described as great by God. And her people, in verse 4, was called out of her. That should not be, listen, the United States, and this is ironic, the United States, at one time, they missionized the world.
That was our greatest export at one point, was missionary work.
Yes.
That's what we did.
And what is sad is now missionaries from Africa, from India, from Guyana, South America are coming to the nation.
Even Reinhard Bonnke is wanting to set up crusades here in America again.
Yes.
I mean, that is...
It's kind of a double-edged sword because they're wanting to come and evangelize the United States, but at the same time, the United States is what finances most of all the missionary work that goes on in the world.
And think about this. Of course, God can make money grow out of trees if he wanted to, but he seems to work within the laws, for the most part, of finances, etc., on a global scale. But we've got a president right now who literally has done, by his own admission, he hates the footprint that America leaves on the world. And he doesn't want us to be, quote, great as we have. He really doesn't believe in that term, American exceptionalism. But he runs around and he said, if you remember, in 2008, before the election, he was around going, I am a citizen of the world. If you remember, President Obama was bowing to the kings. He bowed to the Japanese emperor. He bowed to the Saudi sheiks, the prince there in Saudi Arabia. Did you know that Japan, this was something to me, but he bowed to the Japanese emperor. Do you know that the papers in Japan would not even publish that. They wouldn't print that picture of the president bowing to the Japanese emperor. It offended them that the nation of the United States, that I read this and I was freaked out, that they said it was so beneath the president, the leader of the free world, to bow to their emperor. The emperor was actually almost offended by it. And the nation of
We don't
Japan,
bow. We are.
It is always the subservient one that bows.
Oh, so
Yes.
like they were offended because that's not a part of our culture?
No, because we are. Everybody looks up to us.
Yes.
The world looks up to us as being this great.
do you know
power.
Japan does not even have its own standing army?
No, they look to us. They just have a
Seriously,
defense.
Japan, they've got people in uniform, they call it something else, but they don't have an army.
It's
We know of
it's
an army.
defense. I forget what it is. When I was in Fort Bliss, I was stationed with them.
They don't have, they don't have their own standing army. Do you know why? After we bombed in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, we've turned around and we've made a peace agreement. We are obliged as a nation to defend them. So they have literally relinquished the security of their nation to us. Do you think Japan likes it that we are in debt trillions of dollars to China? No, they don't like it. Because China and Japan are not buddies. So naturally Japan is offended by what we're doing because it personally is a threat on them.
When you look at Obama on the world stage, and this is blunt, but Obama's an idiot. Well, I mean, that's just bottom line. Obama doesn't know what he's doing. Everybody that he deals with completely undermines.
Sadly, the world leaders know that.
Yeah,
And
they
he
do.
has become the butt of jokes. He really has. And
And that's very sad.
yeah,
It's sad.
I mean, say what you want about GW, but he was not the butt of nobody's joke as far as the world was concerned. As far
I
as
had a lot of problems with George Bush and some things that he made, but I tell you one thing, if the Texan said, "I'm coming after you," better run and hide in a spider hole because he's coming.
yeah,
Yeah, you know, he didn't cross no red line in the sand and then say, "Oh, by the way, let me ask this before we dismiss. ISIS, I read something and I want to know, is this true? Because I think it is true and I didn't go back. But ISIS today, that we know, it came out of Syria. Islamic State of Syria, right? Was ISIS the rebel group that Obama was wanting to support and fund to try to overthrow Assad?
yes and no. In a lot of ways, he was. Because well, actually, I'll be honest with you, he actually is. They actually are.
Yes.
And they freaked out. Because see, you remember the guy that said that he was going to, the spokesperson for ISIS said that he was going to fly the flag over
Yeah,
America?
he's dead.
He's killed. Assad killed him.
Did he?
Yeah, that's who killed him, was Assad. Because they were fighting Assad. And so Obama's big dilemma is he has to go to Syria and fight these people, which in essence helps Assad. Which,
Killed his own people with kids.
But let me say,
so why did Assad do that? Because these people are freaks.
listen to me. I don't even know that Assad did that.
What do they say?
I'll tell you why. I seen something other, and I seen a professor. He pulled this out, and I even seen there's someone else, but he wrote a letter to the BBC. Did you ever see that video clip that it shows this woman, and you presume she's a doctor. She's got a doctor's mask on, and she's sitting, and I saw this with my own eyes.
Yeah.
I saw it with my own eyes. I don't have to, it's not a conspiracy nut. I saw it with my own eyes. And she's sitting and she's talking about how that this Syrian gas and all this stuff was released on the people, and the people were bringing it in. I seen another clip, and it was a professor at an Ivy League school, of all places, that was calling attention to it, and I seen it on a Twitter or something. But he was writing to the BBC. He was demanding an answer because, and he sent 2 hyperlinks. The links went to both. The clips were the exact same clip. They're the exact same clip, but the voices were different. And one of the voices, it said that it was the gas that we had seen, and another one, the doctor said that it was napalm.
See, I'll tell you something else.
And all of a sudden I realized they got an off phone. We don't know what the freak they were saying. We assumed it was a doctor. It could have been just a nurse's aide.
Was it all just a setup?
I'll tell you something.
There's
A lot of people
listen,
that believe
a
that.
lot of people, listen to me. I seen as, I'm not talking about conspiracy nuts, I seen as people in the know began to go, we don't even think this gas thing even occurred. And if you look, Assad kept crying, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Here's another thing about Assad that a lot of people don't know. The Christian community loves Assad.
They're safe.
Yes, they are. Assad protects the Christian community there in Syria. Matter of fact, Assad has surrounded himself with a lot of Christians in Syria
Because they're honorable.
because he can
You can
trust
trust
them.
them.
Assad, same thing. What we did. This is where
What's Saddam Hussein?
what we're battling in Iraq. Big GW went and I screamed and cried against it from the time I heard it. The Christian community in Iraq was the oldest community in the world, and Saddam Hussein, just like the president there in Syria, Saddam Hussein actually had himself surrounded with Christians, not Muslims. He couldn't trust Muslims, and he protected Christians. Here's another thing. I always wondered, why would Saddam Hussein not admit that he did not have weapons of mass destruction? Now, some say that he took them to Syria. Who knows? He couldn't have.
He'd been
You
been obliterated.
He
by
would have been
Muslims.
obliterated. In Islam, the only way you stay in power is you have the bigger stick. You're the meaner, badder man, and you keep him at bay. If he would have told the world that he was nothing more than a paper tiger, he wouldn't have lived a month. There would have been a coup and an overthrow. Now that's just the truth.
Well, I'll tell you, for example, there is propaganda, and this kind of gets away from the Assad thing, but for example, I've seen this. The government actually released a report on this. They actually released their studies I was watching. And it's secondhand smoke. We all remember that secondhand smoke, they say, is worse for us than regular smoking. But actually it's not. That the government actually decided that they were tired of people smoking. And they wanted to make people stop. And how do you make people stop? You offend the masses. You get the masses offended.
Now, where do you get this info at?
I watched this on Fox News.
I remember hearing something about it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So they fabricate the...
They fabricated the entire thing on secondhand smoke to make people upset, make the general population upset, to push smokers out.
And that is the very definition of propaganda.
Yes, that's what they did. And it worked. It worked. Secondhand smoke, the CDC, everybody knows for a fact that secondhand smoke is not worse for you. It really, to be honest with you, it doesn't even have that much of an effect on your body. It's really not that harmful for you to sit in a room. To sit in a room with someone that's smoking. But they wanted to push smoking out. So they released propaganda on secondhand
See, I
smoke.
remember some news channel, I couldn't remember if it was Fox, but I remember they was doing a story on it.
Yeah, that,
But the bottom line is this. You don't want to be a conspiracy nut, and you sure don't want to. But the more you understand, the more suspect everything becomes. And the more you get to thinking, are we sheeple or what? But one of the things that I know is this right here. I look at how a group or an organization treats the church. If it treats the church good, it's like Bill Clinton. I was against Clinton on a lot of his policies, but I can tell you about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a great, staunch advocate of the church, especially overseas. A lot of people don't know that, but he was. Bill Clinton was raised, I actually won this Pentecostal, but Clinton had been in a lot of Pentecostal meetings, he's kind of sold his soul, kind of speak, but he's got a Pentecostal background. And I can't remember, he went over and there was kind of a hostage situation, and there was a lot of hostility. I can't remember the specifics of it right now, but Clinton went over there and he had enough power and clout and influence in the world that he went over and he changed. He got him released, and he got literally a change of attitude because that he represented it. And he told him, he said, these people you can trust. These are good people. He told him, I was raised in this. These are honest people. And so, I mean, God can use who he wants to use. Don't make the mistake of assuming that Republican is Christian. Republican is anything but Christian. Democrats anything but Christian. Christian are Christians. And, you know, a lot of times people equate conservatism with Christianity. It's not. It's not. There's a parallel and an overlap a lot of times on what they do, but you know, it's not. You know, in Obama, God may turn around. There may be something that Obama does that the Lord uses that could, I don't see out at this point.
I think it's
Seems
bringing
like he's
apocalypse, is what it
but
seems like.
it's not. What I'm saying is, I believe that Obama's president because God allowed it to be. And I trust the Lord. I choose to trust him. And,
I think Hurricane Sandy did that.
oh yeah, I mean, you know, it's just,
It totally changed.
listen, there's no question about it. Hurricane Sandy tipped the election. There would have been a Mormon in the White House if it hadn't been for Hurricane Sandy. I don't know if it'd been better or if it'd been worse, but I'm just telling you, there would have been a Mormon in the White House. That's just the
The
truth.
Mormon did say that one of the biggest threats to the United States was Russia.
I can tell you right now, the Mormon, who we call him Mormon, Mitt Romney was honored on a lot of stuff.
And we're
Oh, it was
seeing,
in June when it was in June. In June, President Obama said ISIS was a JV team. He used the analogy that if you throw on a Lakers uniform, it doesn't make you Kobe Bryant.
now we're finding that they're the most funded and most tactful group
Hagel,
that we've ever fought.
Secretary of Defense Hagel, just last week said we've never seen anything like ISIS.
They're worse than Al Qaeda.
And Al Qaeda, there's a part of Al Qaeda now that strode their hat in with ISIS. I'm telling you, ISIS is
And
a
20,000
global
troops.
threat.
I think they're the beast. I think they're gonna bring in the beast.
Well, guys, I don't know how long things will become, but I'm not trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you what the Bible says, and I'm trying to show you that. And I know that we kind of discussed some things that wasn't directly out of the scriptures, but I wanted you to see that we are living in an environment to where that the description that the Bible gives, it just dovetails perfectly with where we're at, including in Revelation 18, because a few years ago, that was one of the things that had me stumped. If Revelation 18 was the U.S., where is the persecution? But now, whenever you are a hate group, now when 3% of the population is calling the shots and got it to where that you can't eat, what? When you can't even say that homosexuality is a sin without being risk of jail time and lawsuit. So we had a pastor here last night that admitted that he was sued for homosexuality.
They did.
Because he preached against homosexuality, and a woman in the church that he didn't know if she's a lesbian or not, got a lawyer, and they went after him for $400,000, I think it was, or over $100,000, and he's like, but the Lord reduced it, and he's excited because it's reduced down to $40,000. Yes.
Well, I think it's crazy now that the government is stepping in with these private business owners and is basically saying you have to, at least Christian private business owners saying you have to accept it. Like I just read about another instance of there was a guy who owned a ranch that people had a lot of weddings on, and now he's being sued for like $100,000 because he wouldn't allow a gay couple to get married on his property. And he's a private business owner.
Yes. New Mexico, within the last year, a man and woman who has a photography business. They're in New Mexico. Gay couple come in, wanted them to, even though same-sex marriage isn't legal in New Mexico, or at least at the time that it wasn't, they having a kind of a function that served as a wedding, and they said, you know, that was really against their religion, but they said, or their beliefs, but they gave them the names of some good, credible photographers that wouldn't have any problems with doing it. And instead of them being okay and respecting these people's opinions, they go and sue these people.
Well, they're searching them now. That's what you're running into.
That's exactly
Homosexuals
right.
are searching
They're
people out of
searching
their
them out.
sins.
It's seek and destroy.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about. It's demanded acceptance. And this couple lost that. It went to the New Mexico Supreme Court, and the Christians lost. They lost. How far away? And this is why they lost. They said because the Civil Rights Act, you cannot say you're not going to serve blacks or Indians or whites or whomever you're not allowed to do that by law. And since homosexuals now have established themselves that they're born that way and they've made it a civil rights issue, they're using civil rights laws to sue people. And they said the only thing that's keeping right now pastors from being sued is because that was a business setting. If you're going to do a business, then you can't discriminate. But I don't receive a salary because the church is too small, never have from here. But churches that have pastors that have salaries, you're literally a shadow away from them going, you receive a salary, that's a business, and if this couple wants to be wed and have a Christian wedding and do it in your facility, you better do it or we'll sue you. Because exactly like what you said, the government is going and crossed thresholds and boundaries that have been up and clearly was identified as boundaries and prohibitions about the government couldn't cross. And the Obama administration has kicked the doors down and walked through it and wiped his feet on it. And I mean, how many times did he change? For example, something that just got me, and you could say it's a technicality, but it's not a technicality. The Affordable Care Act. That was a legally legislated and voted upon law. It was signed into law. And Obama, on his own, began to amend that law and say, well, not everybody has to do it at this time. I'll give you a year delay. I'll give you 2 years delay. And he did not have the authority to do it. The law was specific when it went into effect. The president is not a king. I remember when he's doing it, I saw, who was the professor? A very liberal professor at an Ivy League college. And he was on Fox News, and he was going, this is setting precedents that our nation may never recover from.
You see what you're doing is, and again, as I spend many hours reading, from attorneys in class. Even your liberal scholars, absolutely, they love the Constitution. They love it. They love the separation of power between your Congress and your president, stuff like that. And this is one thing that Obama done, and you're beginning to see legal scholars kick against it, is, for example, in the state exchanges. The law says that you cannot get federal subsidies unless you sign up to a state exchange. Instead, the states refused to do it, so we opened up a federal exchange.
Which circumvented the law.
Now you're having millions of people that signed up through federal exchanges who legally are not entitled to subsidies. And now you're looking, and John Boehner is actually suing on this part, and you're actually going to see the Obamacare fall. Obamacare is on its way out. Actually lost in court. A federal judge actually sided with Boehner. And, but he didn't completely wipe it out because so many people are dependent on it at this point.
It's crazy where we're at. Our nation is on a precipice that's, if you really pull your head out of the sand and you look and see where we're at a constitutional crisis, and we're facing incredible obstacles everywhere.